Before we begin tonight's podcast, I would like to send a special memoriam for our fallen actor, Lance Reddick. Lance Reddick was in a cavalcade of films, commanding the screen with his distinctive voice that will command authority and will become iconic for many people who knew of it and would hear him speak. He had an amazing voiceover role in the games Destiny and Destiny 2 as Commander Zavala, the Titan Vanguard. And on television, he had a few key roles in The Wire, Oz, and a major leading role in the show Fringe as Agent Broyles. But what most people would know him as is his acting role in John Wick as Charon, the concierge to the Continental Hotel. For me personally, I not only know him from that and those roles, The Wire excluded, but I do know him from his role in Oz, which I never did finish, but also his role in a film that I find to be underrated with Dan Stevens called The Guest. If you've never seen this film, I highly recommend you find it for rental or to own. It's very stylized and very amazing in terms of the cinematography and the music. In this film, Dan Stevens plays a soldier who shows up at a family's house who have just lost their son or lost their son recently in the military. Dan Stevens' character claims that he knew their son and has promised to take care of them in any way possible. Things escalate in a way that you would not expect while he's there, as a sinister and unsettling feeling comes over the entire family, and his actions start to unsettle people around him. Lance Reddick was a co-star to this film, and even though he had a small part in the role, he still stole the screen with his performance. He will be missed. Rest in peace, Lance Reddick. Welcome to tonight's podcast, everybody. Phoenix here. We're going to talk about some issues, talk about some things. I don't know how long it's going to go tonight, but we're just going to try our best. We're going to go through things I want to talk about. There's a few key points, and after that, if there's anything else, I'll bring it up. I hope everybody's had a great week since the last show. Hope that people have made wondrous connections or had job promotions or have had blessings in their lives. I myself have had kind of a normal week. Just worrying about this podcast, trying to figure things out, trying to figure out what to do. I'm honestly thinking about getting a co-host because I don't know if I can do this as a one-man show, despite the idea of me doing that to begin with, to get my thoughts out there. But we're going to try to. And we're going to try it as a one-man show and with a co-host, see what happens. So, let's get to it. Shazam! Fury of the Gods flopped massively at the box office. Harkening back to our discussions about the DC universe and other companies not giving fans what they want and not sticking to the source material. DC is not one that is that is to blame for going against source material, but it is to blame for going against what the fans want. And I think that may be the big reason as to why this movie failed at the box office. That, and possibly very poor writing. Things started great with Man of Steel. It kind of diverged at Batman vs Superman. That was not entirely DC's fault. Zack Snyder did have a lot that I felt was not great about his vision for Batman vs Superman. That is seen in the extended cut. Although I do like some of the ideas that he presented that was shown in his full vision of the film. But DC was kind of saved with the next big movie that came out, Wonder Woman, which was a fantastic film directed by Patty Jenkins and continued the story that they were setting up for the Justice League. Problems started to arise after that, though. Justice League, notoriously, was found to be unwatchable by WB executives. Joss Whedon was brought in. The story about his mistreatment of the actors, especially Ray Fisher, are all known public. He felt that the Justice League film that Zack Snyder had created made no sense, was confusing, and people wouldn't understand it. So he went back and he reshot most of the film, changing the storyline almost completely, dropping it down from a 4-hour movie or a 4.5-hour movie to just over 2 hours and 15 minutes. The movie did have good fan approval for some people. Critics did not like it. And Justice League basically also flopped at the box office. Now, with those things happening, Ray Fisher had spoken up about his mistreatment during the film by Joss Whedon, and WB essentially responded by firing him. They took Joss Whedon's side, or essentially didn't take any side other than just firing the person who spoke up and the caused the uproar over the mistreatment, which is not cool. Zack Snyder reportedly has never watched the theatrical cut that Joss Whedon made of Justice League. But after Justice League, or before Justice League actually, they had, of course, David Ayer's Suicide Squad, the movie in which Margot Robbie debuted as Harley Quinn. At least I believe that was her debut as Harley. Starring Will Smith, Margot Robbie, and Joel Kinnaman. There were problems with the making of this film as well. Jared Leto has stated on record that his portrayal of the Joker, which was panned by critics and fans alike, was not fair to be judged as, according to him, and script leaks that have come out, seen the light of day in the years to come, that his portrayal was only 5% of what he'd actually filmed for the film. Which, if true, I can't fault him for his horrible appearance in this film, or what seemed like a horrible appearance. Personally, I didn't have much of an issue with it. But if what he says is true, I have a big issue with not having seen his full performance. DC in the future would go on to say there would not be a release of the David Ayer cut of the film. Notice the phrase and the wording that was spoken there. the David Ayer cut will not be released, meaning there is one. For you see, when this movie was made, once again, WB stepped in, took over the editing, took over the writing, and did not let the director deliver on his vision. This movie also failed at the box office. Now, around the time the Justice League was released, Zack Snyder had made it public that his vision for the Justice League was nothing that was told to him or said to him, or I guess even texted him about what was put out in theaters by Joss Whedon. Because, as I said, I think he actually said he's never watched a scene or a bit from the Joss Whedon film. He probably has now, as we'll get into in a minute for the reasoning I'm about to get into. A campaign was started roughly maybe a week, maybe a month after Justice League, if I have my timeline correct, to release the Snyder Cut of Justice League. This will go on for about 2 years, when finally WB will relent, allow Zack Snyder to go back, take his footage that he had filmed for the film, remove every single scene that Joss Whedon filmed, as he stated he would not be using anything that was filmed by Joss Whedon, which makes me think that he now has in fact seen that film. And he was allowed to make what is essentially a 4.5 hour true amazing film, in my opinion. There are detractors to it, but I feel that the movie was great. After the Snyder Cut was released, my mic peaked there. Fans clamored for Zack Snyder to retake the helm of DC and make more films for them and basically save the entire movie franchise. Because at the moment and at the time, Wonder Woman 1984, the second Wonder Woman film, was critically panned, and I believe also failed at the box office. My sources, I'm gonna have to check my sources on that, but I do believe it did fail. It lacked the spark that the original had, and despite having Pedro Pascal and fulfilling fan service of having Chris Pine in the film lacked in every area that made Wonder Woman, the original film with the Gal Gadot, great. Birds of Prey had also come out at this time. Birds of Prey, I believe, actually changed its name from Birds of Prey or the Emancipation of One Harley Quinn to simply just Birds of Prey. I honestly don't know how they did the box office. For all I know, I think it actually evened out. Wasn't a hit, wasn't a flop, it just was. That film was actually great. I enjoyed it very much, and I think that it could have had maybe a few little tweaks in the story, but I liked it. Now, at the time that people were clamoring for a restoration of the Snyderverse, as it's called, due to the fact that Zack Snyder had started the DC films with Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman, setting up in Batman vs Superman the Justice League with cameos and basic origin stories quickly being shown via video recordings or DVD recordings that Wonder Woman was seeing on a television screen, and with the Flash making a cameo in Batman vs Superman, speaking to Bruce Wayne. James Gunn was given the helm to make basically a reboot of the Suicide Squad. This time starring Joel Kinnaman, Margot Robbie, and John Cena as Peacemaker. This film was a complete opposite of what the Suicide Squad was, or was a complete. Or, okay, I have to explain a little bit. David Ayer's original idea was just called Suicide Squad, about Task Force X, the DC Comics um, team of supervillains who are put on missions in which they might not come back, forced against their will to compete in them. Well, not actually forced against their will. They're given the option for basically a reduced sentence. He named it Suicide Squad, the film. DC, however, changed his vision, changed his film, and David Ayer himself has said that was not the film I made. James Gunn, however, when he remade or did a reboot or a semi reboot, as it was a sequel to and a reboot of the Will Smith and Margot Robbie film, he named it The Suicide Squad. And this film, as I said, was the complete opposite of what the original film with Will Smith was. It was very comedic, very very goofy, very Thor Ragnarok like, and very James Gunn like. If you've seen Guardians of the Galaxy, if you've seen Slither, if you've seen basically any James Gunn movie outside of Brightburn, you would know how this film would have been. Now, at the end of this film, he teased an idea for a Peacemaker television show, which was already announced to be in the works following his film release. Peacemaker came out, and while Peacemaker was goofy and was absurd, it was actually very entertaining. I didn't think I'd like it. I actually disliked the character immensely due to what happened in the film as a nerd and taking the film personally. But I liked the show, and by the end of it, I actually started to like the character more. Now, James Gunn has made serious films, or at least one serious film. He made Brightburn, which is, for all intents and purposes, a very serious horror film. But the problem is, James Gunn, while he does have his serious moments in films, I truly feel that he can't do anything but comedy. I feel that anything he makes is going to be essentially the equivalent to Thor Ragnarok, or maybe somewhere in the middle of the comedy stylings of Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder. I think it's going to be probably in the middle of that spectrum. The reason I'm saying this is because DC has officially given him the rights to the DC movie universe, or given him the helm, and he's basically rebooting everything. And the reason I'm angry about this, not only because I'm not the biggest James Gunn fan, is because not only has he been given the helm, when they were making Black Adam, which was also a box office failure, The Rock was pushing very hard for Henry Cavill to return as Superman. As while Christopher Reeves is the quintessential Superman of the 1970s, and in most people's mind, Henry Cavill is the Superman of the contemporary age that many see and many think of when they think of Superman. The Rock managed to get Henry Cavill back, and from what I understand, the idea and the basis behind him being rehired was, we're going to see if Black Adam works out. And if it works out and it's a hit, Henry Cavill is going to stay. It wasn't a hit, and Henry Cavill was fired again. Now, the reason I'm talking about that part in particular is because James Gunn revealed recently that he was already, after being given the helm of the DC Universe already writing a script for a young new Superman while they already had Henry Cavill under contract and were bringing him back, meaning he was already going to fire him by the time they were already rehiring him. I think that that is a low move, and I think that to treat an actor with such disrespect is just horrible and completely disrespectful of a company. And I believe that DC owes Henry Cavill an apology. Not only Henry Cavill, but also Ray Fisher. We can't forget that Ray Fisher went through the things that he alleged he went through with Joss Whedon. Which, if he did go through them, DC owes him a major apology. Especially after they fired him for talking about the actions that were taken against him by Joss Whedon. Apparently, the other actors in the Joss Whedon's versions of Justice League who were there while he was filming have backed up his claims, or at least said that Joss Whedon was not easy to work with. So I am inclined to believe Ray Fisher. Well, there's some good news on the front of Zack Snyder. DC has started selling off properties and portions, or WB has started selling off portions and properties of DC to Netflix and Amazon. And when they announced the sellings, I forgot if it was to Amazon or Netflix, Zack Snyder started liking the tweets talking about how either Netflix or Amazon now owned parts of the DC universe. And he started liking tweets again about restoring his universe of superheroes and his works in his comic book movie works. Last week, Zack Snyder released on some platform I have never heard of before, which I guess is essentially like like Twitter, a video that acted as if it was an emergency broadcast brought to him or brought to us by Darkseid in the tone and way of Man of Steel, in which it was like the emergency alien broadcast taking over the airwaves. And it was Darkseid's voice basically telling us the dates of April 28th, April 29th, and April 30th, and to save the date. He followed this up by showing the next day a picture of Henry Cavill as Superman with quotes, very cryptic quotes, about the hero's journey and a circle being completed. He followed the next day by showing a picture of Ben Affleck as Batman with another few quotes, kind of cryptic, kind of fan servicey. He followed that the next day by showing a picture of Gal Gadot from the behind the scenes of the original Wonder Woman film. I think either that or Batman vs. Superman with more quotes. Now, people have figured out that April 28th, April 29th, and April 30th are the dates for the annual SnyderCon Fest, in which Zack Snyder shows his films, at least I think the DC films, back to back, and takes Q&A questions after each of them. Now, that would be all well and good. The problem here is, to my knowledge, he has never, ever advertised it like this before, or used anything from his version of Justice League in such a way to make a video using a voice actor from the film to send the message for people to remember the date or to advertise for it, or do what he's doing involving Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. That, plus the dates. I mean that plus that plus the fact that he's using the photos and the fact that he's liking the tweets and reliking media talking about the sale of DC movie property to Amazon and Netflix, where he has been very successful. Netflix, I mean, with some of his ventures, leads me and others to think something is definitely in the works, and a major announcement may be made at SnyderCon 2023. What would that announcement be? For most fans, myself, it's the hope that Zack Snyder has officially been given the green light by whoever bought the Snyder verse or the Zack Snyder features of the DC films to go ahead and make Justice League Parts 2 and 3 and possibly make more movies with Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck. Now, knowing what the stories of what the story of Justice League 2 and 3 was going to be, as it was supposed to be as Justice League 1, 2 and 3 were supposed to be a three-part long epic, kind of like Lord of the Rings. I don't really like some of the ideas behind it, and I kind of hope that he changes course on a few bits and pieces of it, or like a bit, or at least one major part of it. But to know that the fans will probably be getting what they want makes me very happy. Because quite frankly, many fans have already given up on the idea of James Gunn being at the helm of DC. He's already released his ideas and his plans. He wants to reboot everything. He wants to have the story with a young Clark Kent basically just being a reporter and dealing with being a reporter instead of Superman or something like that, which I think is ridiculous. I think he should just stick to the basic formula of Superman and just find a way to have it be a new villain or maybe an older villain and just have it be, a basic Superman story, albeit with a twist, but nothing like we're just going to invert Superman on his head or invert the tropes and make it more about him worrying about being a reporter than being Superman. I'm not into stuff like that. He's also basically revealed that he's going to replace pretty much everybody with younger actors and that he wants to basically rebuild and restart the DC universe. And with the Flash movie coming out with Ezra Miller, who, quite frankly, I really do not care to see as the Flash, and it makes me very upset whenever I see Justice League scenes and Flash scenes with him in it now, and knowing that he's in this film. I believe that it is going to be a reboot for the Justice League, as well as because as many of you know, the Flash movie is based off the Flashpoint comic series, which was also covered very briefly in the Flash television series. And if they follow the route that I think they're going to take, they could very easily splinter the DC universe into James Gunn's universe. But as I was saying that, or just before I said that, it hit me. They could splinter this into multiple universes. James Gunn's universe, the original Snyderverse, and even a new universe that Amazon can make with different people playing Superman, Batman, and such. See, the CW has already combined all of these DC properties, even the movies, into one massive multiverse. So the Flash movie could easily just work off of that and splinter it off even more. But if it's true that Zack Snyder is in fact coming back to the helm and at least getting one more go at it, then bravo. I'm so grateful to at least have hope that Zack Snyder is able to complete his vision because, like I said, I was a fan of his version of the Justice League. It was a completely different film than what Joss Whedon presented, and as long as it was, I still sat through it and wanted to see what was going to happen. I knew a lot of what was going to happen, but I still was enthralled by it. People can have their complaints about Zack Snyder. I certainly did not like Watchmen as much, even though I have a couple versions of that film, including the Ultimate Cut. But his portrayals of Superman and portrayal of Batman in Justice League were great. Batman vs Superman, I was not a fan of Batman in that film. Batman in that film was essentially, even though Zack Snyder has gone on record as of late saying that Batman was not a murderer in that film, Batman was essentially just collecting mounds of bodies in one part of that film in the Batmobile chase. And as a fan of Batman, I was completely thrown off by what I was seeing happening. And as cool as the fight scenes were with Batman, I still just it still was in my head, and I was kind of thrown off by it. But he he resolved that in his version of the Justice League. He made Batman truer to his personality as portrayed in the comics, albeit a wiser, older Batman. And I gave it a massive seal of approval because the Batman that was shown in the Joss Whedon version of Justice League, I found to be a total idiot. For a master strategist and a master of planning and having no fear, Batman came off very lightheaded in the Joss Whedon version of the film. And I was so happy to see Zack Snyder correct that and actually show Batman had a plan for pretty much everything in the film and was actually planning and deducing things to the point where he knew that by the time that he would need help, it would already have arrived. Hopefully, after this film is over, Ezra Miller is gone from the DCU. I do not want to see that man or that person or I do not want to see that I don't know the word for this. I do not want to see that entity because he says he identifies as they. As so I don't know what to say. I do not want to see Ezra Miller on screen in the DCU anymore. After everything that I've heard about Ezra Miller, I find him or find they find them to be downright repulsive. If you know the stories and heard the stories of the cult that he or that they had on their ranch, of the stuff they kept from movies and the felonies that have been presented by them or committed by them, the restraining orders issued, I think that Ezra Miller needs to go from the DCU. I don't think they deserve a spot there anymore. And like I said, depending on how the Flash movie does, I don't know what's going to happen after the DC after the Flash movie for the DCU. Black Adam's failed, and that had The Rock in it. For of all people to have a movie that flopped, it was The Rock. In a movie that I honestly enjoyed, and a movie that when I saw the commercials for, I was hyped for, and I still don't understand how that movie flopped. Shazam: Fury of the Gods flopped. Wonder Woman 1984 flopped. Aquaman 2 is already on its way to being a flop unless they make major changes because Test screenings have been shown, and something unprecedented, or almost unprecedented, has happened during test screenings. People have actually walked out of test screenings for Aquaman 2. And it's not because of a certain female actress that was in the news heavily recently, as she apparently only has a few minutes of screen time in the film. It's apparently because the film is just boring and bad. This is not good. This is really not good for the DCU. Change is needed, but I do not think that James Gunn is the one to do it. Now, you might be asking yourself, what about The Batman by Matt Reeves with Robert Pattinson? What about Joker 2 with Joaquin Phoenix? Well, I can tell you this. As those two movies are what are known as Elseworld films, as in the comics, Elseworld is essentially the name given to alternate realities that don't matter to the main story at all, unless of course the Elseworlds cross over in canonical comic book crossovers where the universes merge or meet. They're untouchable, or they're not good to be touched. Matt Reeves has full control over the Batman. And Joker 2 with Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn, full control by the director. I'm not quite sure about the Joker 2 being a musical. I'm really not. It's kind of off putting to me. I'm not a massive musical fan. I do like some musicals, but I just don't think I would want to see a Joker film in which the entire film is some weird psychedelic musical or whatever it may they're probably planning to do with it, considering it's a continuation of Joker with Joaquin Phoenix. But I will say I hope that DC can land on its feet. The Gotham Knights television series doesn't look very good. Gotham Knights, if you aren't familiar with it, is actually a storyline that was actually also made into a game recently, in which Batman has perished and the former Robins and Batgirl have to unite in order to take back the city and replace Batman on their own without his guidance. That show looks terrible. It looks, from the commercials I've seen, it looks like a low budget, maybe YouTube series or something. And I was just completely shocked when I saw the trailer and saw the quality of what was being shown. That brings up another thing. DC also filmed an entire Bat Batwoman movie or Batgirl movie. I think it was Batwoman movie, not starring Ruby Rose, not starring any of the actors from the CW show, but it had Michael Keaton in it as Batman. Well, the entire movie was filmed. Millions were spent on this film. And then they did test screenings. The test screenings got the same exact rating as Black Adam. And instead of releasing the film, they just put it on the shelf, never to be seen by anyone. Whatever happens in that film, well, some people know what happens and they've leaked some of the script and I've forgotten most of it, but we're never going to see it unless one day somebody decides to just release it on HBO Max or on DVD or on Blu-ray. But an entire Michael Keaton as Batman film is gone. Millions wasted due to poor testing reviews. And from what I understand, the budget for that movie also looked insanely terrible. As people said, it looked like they basically went to Walmart and just got the suits and got the prosthetics and or the outfit prosthetics and such for Batwoman to wear, and it was just comically bad. The fact that DC is at the point where they're actually making movies and not even releasing them now is should be an indicator and a sign by even the most common of people, not even who are not even remotely super interested in film such as I am, that something is wrong here. Blue Beetle's coming out. That has potential, but again, I don't know what they're going to do with it. I don't know how it's going to be portrayed. I hope it's portrayed in the proper way. And I actually hope that Booster Gold appears in the movie. I'm going to rescind that a little bit. I hope, but I also don't hope that Booster Gold's in this film. Why? Because, one, I do want to see Booster Gold in live action, as Booster Gold is Blue Beetle's partner, famously in the comics. But also, I don't want to see him, due to the fact that DC is in such a state right now that this could be a disaster of a portrayal of Booster Gold, depending on what they do. Marvel's not in great shape either at the moment. We all know the problems with Marvel. She-Hulk, Falcon and Winter Soldier. WandaVision was okay. Which, I mean, it did well ratings wise. Shang-Chi wasn't really a massive box office hit, I don't think. Doctor Strange kind of failed. The Eternals was a massive flop. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, that failed massively too. Kevin Feige is apparently moving to another position in the next couple of years from Marvel. Apparently, it has a lot to do with the direction that Marvel's taking that he has to work with, and they have recently fired somebody who works in I believe the writing department, or at least the consulting department of Marvel, who has a lot of interesting ideas for Marvel and Star Wars. And it looks like an upheaval is happening, at least at Marvel, to try and fix things. DC is already having its upheaval, but I don't think DC's upheaval is actually doing what it needs to do, or I think it's going in the wrong direction. I think instead of an upheaval, I think DC is going into a downheaval, if that's even a phrase or a word. Marvel, it seems, may actually be taking the proper steps. DC may just be sinking itself into a deeper hole. But we'll have to see. Time will tell. We'll see if the Snyderverse is restored. We'll see what happens with the Flash. Who knows? Maybe Zack Snyder will bring Black Adam into his Snyderverse and introduce him. I don't know about Shazam now after the horrible opening weekend that it had. All I can say is Marvel movies, DC movies, I think have reached the fatigue moment where people are done with them. For me personally, I had told people years ago, before Avengers Endgame came out, that when that movie comes out, I'm done. I'm not going to watch anymore because for me, it feels like finishing high school and graduating, and anything after that is just going to be for the new people and the new people that join the Marvel fan base. But I kept watching, and some of the things I've seen I really wish I didn't see. I am excited for Daredevil coming back, and I am very excited with the news of the Punisher coming back in the Daredevil television series. As John Bernthal himself has said, he would not come back to that role unless it was true to the character and was not toned down. And now he has officially signed on for it. That was a few weeks ago that he made that announcement was made. So I'm excited to see what's going on, but also kind of apprehensive. I don't know what the future has in store for Marvel and DC. I hope that they at least get back on their feet. I hope that the actors succeed. Because don't get me wrong, while there are some actors that I don't like, well, I take that back. There are some actors I don't like, but there are also actors. There are actors that I do not want to see in Hollywood anymore. Ezra Miller is one of them. If you do a Google search and do a study into what's going on with Ezra Miller, you'll see why. But I do want to see actors succeed, and this is going to sound harsh, but I do want companies to fail sometimes, particularly DC, because the actions they're taking right now, I feel need them to fail in order to basically give them the spanking they need and the humbleness they need in order and the humility they need to fix things and correct things. Marvel needs to do the same thing. It actually has gone through, and Disney has actually gone through this with Star Wars already. They've already had Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni come in, I believe, to try and fix things due to the backlash and a lot of things that have happened in the Star Wars film and show universe, and the fan backlash and the ratings drops and critic assessments. So I think the same is happening for Marvel right now. DC as well, but I think Marvel, since it's so much more involved in the movie going aspect and the film aspect, they have the proper people in the company that can basically fix this. While I think DC is stumbling about trying anything they can to get back on their feet without any real sense of direction. But time will tell. Who knows? Maybe will be a renaissance for DC. Anyway, that's all for this week. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Hope everybody takes care. And I hope you all have a pleasant week. And I hope that everything goes well for everybody. Peace out.